of these three, Blackpool South and Kingswood, I would expect those to go Labour at the general election and in the by-election. Wellingborough, I think, the majority is more than 35%. I think that's one where it may well go Labour at the by-election and then return to the Conservatives at the general.
Well, it was all triggered by the oil and gas plans. The government saying it wants to exploit more oil and gas. It prompted the former Energy Minister, Chris Skidmore, to announce on Friday that he was quitting the Tory party and will quit immediately as an MP, triggering a third by-election prospect for Rishi Sunak. Well, what on earth is going on? The veteran journalist Michael Crick, who runs the account on X called Tomorrow's MPs, keeping track of all the candidates the parties pick, joins me now. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
There was a time not that long ago, I think you came on the show, where we talked about how there weren't many by-elections, and now they seem to be endless.
There have been a lot in this Parliament, and of course, one of the reasons these days why there are more by-elections is because of this process of the recall petition. And if 10% of the constituents, if the MP gets into trouble and is the Standards Committee votes for suspension for more than 10 days, I think it is, then there's a recall petition. And if more than 10% of the voters in that constituency vote to recall him and have a by-election, or her, then there is one. So we've had four of those. I'm just trying to remember. No, I think one of them was no. There've been five of them altogether, and three in this Parliament. But so that's another reason. Whereas in the old days, the governments didn't really care about by-elections that much, and they were often making MPs in judges or giving them ambassadorships or whatever. And so there used to be a lot more by-elections. Also, parties are more careful. They sort of persuade their MPs to retire before they might die. And indeed, there was one period of 20 years between 2000 and 2021, I think it was, where only one Labour MP died.
Yeah.
Sorry, one Conservative MP died. And that's because the Conservatives were quite good at pushing them out once they reached their late 60s.
So we've got three potentially coming our way. Chris Skidmore's seat in Kingswood, Kingswood, which is outside Bristol. Wellingborough, which is the most pressing one, and then Blackpool South, where Scott Benton faces suspension because of his offering to lobby for gambling clubs. What on earth is going on in Wellingborough?
Well, Peter Bone, there was a recall petition there. He lost it, so there has to be a by-election. He's entitled to stand in the by-election if he wants as an independent, but the Conservatives don't want him. And in fact, yesterday, extraordinarily, they chose Peter Bone's partner or girlfriend, a woman called Helen Harrison. Not the famous Mrs. Bone that Peter Bone always used to refer to in Prime Minister's questions for years and years and years in the House of Commons. They separated, and now he's with Helen Harrison, who is a serious potential MP in her own right. She stood for Bolsover in 2017. She's been shortlisted in three other places in this selection round. But it does seem an extraordinary decision to make. Now, the Sunday Times reported as long ago as October that actually Peter Bone was threatening that unless they chose Helen Harrison as his successor as the candidate, then he'd stand as an independent. Peter Bone denied that at the time, but lo and behold, that's what's happened. And the other two contenders yesterday afternoon in the Conservative selection, neither of them looked very likely to win. I mean, both of them were outsiders, and these days you've pretty much got to be local to be chosen anywhere. And they were outsiders who'd never stood for Parliament before. So Helen Harrison, I think, won pretty comfortably. But what the electorate's going to make of this, I don't know. There is actually a long historic tradition, though, of wives, or in this case, a partner, succeeding their husbands, sometimes when they die, sometimes when they leave the Commons for other reasons. But I think it's going to be tough. I think Labour will probably win that one. I think Labour will probably win all three.
Probably not a long-standing tradition if you've been forced out for bullying and sexual misconduct allegations.
Yeah, I know. How's she going to explain that? I suspect it will be very, very difficult for journalists to interview Helen Harrison,
which is something we've seen previously.
Well, we saw that in Hartlepool. We saw it in the one in Lincolnshire. Something in Sleaford, and a few years ago. The parties say, oh, well, they're out canvassing on some estate. Which one? Oh, I can't remember. They'll just make sure that the candidate isn't around. And if you're a journalist visiting for a day or two, it's often impossible to find them.
And just on the broader picture then, this drip of by-election defeats. I mean, obviously they hung in Uxbridge, the Tories. Does it affect ultimately what happens at a general election, or is it just a sort of another bad day's headlines for a prime minister?
I think it's about party morale mainly, and of course they also get to experiment with campaigning methods. They're allowed to spend a lot more. In fact, they just put the limits up. I think they can spend about £175,000 on a campaign now, which is a huge amount of money. Mind you, having said that, some parties have spent a lot more than even this new big limit in the past. And everybody flocks to the by-election. All the, and MPs are all told they have to go and visit 3 times, and all the whips will get onto them and so on. And often most of the people campaigning there are MPs. But they're a lot less exciting actually than they used to be, by-elections. But in terms of actually the long-term picture, you often see, an opposition party will win a seat at a by-election, and the general election occurs 6 months later, and it goes back again. And of these 3, Blackpool South and Kingswood, I would expect those to go Labour at the general election and in the by-election. Wellingborough, I think, the majority is more than 35%. I think that's one where it may well go Labour at the by-election and then return to the Conservatives at the general. But who knows?
Who knows? That's the beauty of it. We don't know.
Yeah,
Michael, lovely to see. Michael Crick there. And it's well worth following Michael actually on X. It's called Tomorrow's MPs. And he's sort of tracking, like he was saying, you basically just need to be local to get selected. The other interesting thing actually about Kingswood is that I think Chris Skidmore's seat disappears at the next election. So whoever it is might only be an MP for a very short
about half of it then becomes the seat that Jacob Rees-Mogg is going to be fighting. And Labour have got high hopes of beating him.
Why politics is interesting. Great to see you, Michael.